Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1.
Range is hot.
Lock and load. It's time for the Gun Rack with your hosts, Joey and Drew.
Hello, and welcome to the Gun Rack's Sonoran Desert Institute School of Firearms Technology's official podcast. I'm Josiah. Upper folks call me Joey, and with me we have no one, not today. As a point of fact, I'm here flying solo for the first time in a long time. Drew and I normally meet up on Fridays, sometimes Thursday, but late in the week to do our podcast recordings, and we set up a time to record on Friday, and then I realized there right at the end of Thursday that Friday was my 5th wedding anniversary, and as I value my life, I did not want to cancel on that, so I told Drew I'd record solo today. So a little bit of a glitch in our schedule, but I'm very excited to share this one with you. This is definitely more of a, the last podcast on the left would call it a relaxed fit episode, a little more relaxed, and I've got some fun content lined up for you guys. It's also 11:03 at the time I record this, and I am drinking a cocktail of my own creation. Well, no, it's a very famous cocktail. I'm drinking a drink that I made, is probably a better way to say that. For those of you who are fans of bourbon, this is one to put in your back pocket in case you haven't already. This is a Manhattan with Four Roses small batch bourbon. To give you guys some context, in case this podcast goes awry at any point, I poured a double, which is to say, we took a cup, we filled it with ice. We took a measuring cup, filled it with ice. In the measuring cup, we poured 4 ounces of Four Roses small batch bourbon, 2 ounces of sweet vermouth, I forget the brand, 6 dashes of orange Angostura bitters, and 1 tablespoon of cocktail cherry, not maraschino cherry, the syrup that's in it, which I dilute normally a little bit, so a little less than a tablespoon in actuality. We stir all that, not shake it, in that mixing cup for about 30 seconds. We strain it out after pouring out all of the ice in the cup we used to chill it originally. And then we garnish it with 2 cherries, cocktail cherries, not maraschino cherries. If you're going to do it, don't be a Philistine. Anyway, that's where we're at. I don't think I've ever had a drink while recording this podcast before, so that's going to be a lot of fun. But I always like hearing new drink recipes. Manhattan's a pretty basic one, but if you've never had it, it is worth your time, and holy smokes, is it a lot of alcohol. Today, we are going to skip some of our bits and our segments. I am going to take a moment real quick and talk about Sonoran Desert Institute, because that's what we do here, and then we're going to launch right into our subject material. So, without any further ado, Sonoran Desert Institute is an online school that focuses on firearms and unmanned technologies. Currently, the School of Firearms Technology, which is, of course, what this podcast is attached to, provides 2 programs. One is a Certificate in Firearms Technology Gunsmithing, and then, of course, the Associate of Science in Firearms Technology, also known as the ASFT. SDI is accredited by the Distance Education Accrediting Commission, and it's just a wonderful place to go to school. If you are interested in learning more about Sonoran Desert Institute, hop on to sdi.edu to learn more. Now, what could we possibly be talking about today without my capable, thick-haired babysitter Drew to hold my hand along the way? Well, I went to school and studied history, and I studied theater, and I've been a writer, reporter, gun marketing guy, a little bit of everything for the past 7 years, a little more, and so I thought it would be fun to take some time and break down the top war movies of really of all time, actually. I was going to put a timeline on it, but the oldest one here on this list that I've made is 97 as of this year. If you are a war movie fan, you might already know what it is just from that. If so, props to you. But 1 second here, let me count this. All right, I just went and counted them by hand. So we have a top 8 list of military movies of all time. And then, I should say, war movies. We've got a couple that are kind of adjacent. And then I have quite a few honorable mentions that we'll move through quickly. But before we do those honorable mentions, let's get our first 5 out of the way. Let's start right now. For those of you who have been listening to this podcast for a long time, you know that Drew and I are both very huge fans of William Shakespeare, and because of that, I had to put one of Shakespeare's best adaptations at number 8 on this list. That is going to be the Kenneth Branagh version of Henry V. It was put out in the late 80s, and it is about as good, both when it comes to that stylized medieval, and that was really more Renaissance warfare that we come to love and expect from stylistic Shakespeare epics. But it's also the best way if you're interested in that kind. If you want to feel fancy, you want to watch a war movie, Henry V is the way to go. Kenneth Branagh is about as good as they get. Nothing but respect for that. And there's some. If you ever heard the phrase "band of brothers," we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he that sheds his blood today with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed shall something. I thought I could just do it out of the pocket like that. But Henry V, take some time to watch it. It's not that long, and as far as Shakespeare goes, it's as accessible as you could imagine. Plus, Kenneth Branagh goes hard, dude. It's really good. All right, next on the list is Das Boot, 1981 film. Excellent film about a German submarine patrolling the Atlantic Ocean during the Second World War. It is it's the film that when we're talking about tension and we're talking about, it's very it's almost a thriller, really, and it's as good a naval film. It's the best naval film on this list by far that you could possibly hope for. The other one I'd put behind that is Hunt for Red October, which I did not permit myself to come in because technically there's not a war on at that. But I love a good naval exchange, and I love a good tense movie, and Das Boot really does both of those really well. All right, next up, hold on. I spent so much time putting ice on everything, I didn't want to sip this thing down when it gets lukewarm. Next on the list, 1917. Now that's a newer movie, but 1917 it's shot to look like one take, the whole film. And as someone who really, really appreciates theater and performing arts, I can't even, I've made short films before. I can't tell you how difficult that is to do. And the longest thing I've ever made was like 7 minutes, maybe even less. Doing that for something as sprawling as that is great. World War One is really, there are 2 World War One films on here. And because of that, oh my goodness, this is a list of 9, not a list of 8. Forgive me. And on this list of 9 now, my goodness, there are 3 World War One films. And it's kind of funny because Netflix did launch a new adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front, which is not on this list. But when I think of war films related to World War One, there's only like 5 I think of. 3 of them are on this list, so I don't want to spoil them. But the other one that's not on it is Gallipoli. There just aren't enough good films on a topic that is so important and dictated so much of how the rest of the century was going to look. Grossly underserved component, both of media and documentaries. There is Peter Jackson, the guy who did Lord of the Rings, did a World War One documentary that's excellent. Check that out. But in terms of films, 1917 is about as good as it gets for gritty. A lot of good. A good war movie doesn't have to be overly complex in its plot. It just needs to hit the themes well, in my opinion anyway. And 1917 does both. It's really good. Could not recommend more. Next on the list is going to be another World War One film on I think it's 1,000 miles away, not many hundreds of miles away, Lawrence of Arabia. This is a Peter O'Toole movie, Peter O'Toole, and Alec Guinness. playing a guy from the Middle East, which probably couldn't get away with that now. But it is all about this guy, and Peter O'Toole goes out there and helps basically activate native Bedouin tribes against the Ottoman Empire, and they serve basically asymmetric warfare. A lot of attacking logistics. It's really amazing. But outside of the historical context of this film, this is considered, it's ages long. It might be 4 full hours long. It's like the epic. If you want an Odyssey style film, it is the epic of epics, and I cannot recommend Lawrence of Arabia to you more. It's also got a lot of very funny quotes in there that my friends and I like to exchange with each other. All right, time for another sip. Here we go. All right, so on this list of 9, we just blasted through 4 in pretty quick succession. Excuse me for the little bits of stumbling through here, doing this kind of a one-take wonder. I paused briefly to count and then counted wrong. So if that proved anything, it's that taking time to edit this one is just not the way to go. But we're going to go through some films that are more, I would be willing to wager, more military history buffs have seen than some of these others. If you have not seen any of the first 4, strongly recommend that you do. 1917 was pretty commercially successful. Das Boot seems to get ignored, and I can't really quantify why. I don't know, because it's older and a lot of military history fans are like a newer generation, or I don't know, but there's just no excuse not to watch these great films. Some of these are much more popular. In fact, of the last 5 here, if you haven't seen at least 4 of them, I'm not sure if you're allowed to call yourself a military movie fan anymore. So, with all that, let's go into number 5. And number 5 is Saving Private Ryan. 1998 film. We were blessed. Within 5 years of each other, we got Band of Brothers, and we got Saving Private Ryan. We got 2. Band of Brothers is, of course, a mini-series, but we got 2 of the best World War II artistic pieces in very quick succession. It's a Steven Spielberg film. It is a war film that is a take on, based off of a true event, which is, of course, I believe it's the Sullivan brothers who all passed away while serving on the same boat. But really, it is about how absurd war can be, even when pursuing righteous aims, in order to preserve a family's this poor mother from losing all of her kids. They send a bunch of other people to go die in his place. It's madness, but it's also what had to be done. They felt to right a wrong. And I mean, if you haven't seen Saving Private Ryan, where have you been? But it's about as good as it gets. You also have Tom Hanks, Matt Damon, Vin Diesel for some reason, and then also the guy from Cheers, whose name I can never remember. He's also in The Good Place. Jeremy Davies. It's a great film. It's truly excellent. Speaking of epics, that's another one for you. And Normandy and the invasion of Europe is such a rich source material for this kind of thing. Reenactors everywhere. It's that first 15 minutes of the film is probably going to forever be the most famous sequence in military film history, and they're right to do so. They're right to regard it as so. It's great stuff. All right, next on the list, We Were Soldiers, which gets a little bit, in my head, these 2 are just equally good films. We take 2 absolute, I don't have a word other than Giga Chad for these guys, 2 absolute units in terms of acting in the 90s, and that is, of course, Mel Gibson and Tom Hanks, is 2 of the most famous people on the planet. And they go about making war films in very similar time periods. I think We Were Soldiers was 2003. I don't have that in front of me. It's right around there. And while Saving Private Ryan is essentially based off of a true story, but not a true story in itself, We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson covers the Battle of Yadrang Valley, which is considered by most people to be the first real, there was an engagement, but like battle of the Vietnam War. It's superb, and it covers both the extreme tension of covering a battle from home and families receiving all this news, and then just the brutality of that conflict and people just getting dumped into a space where they don't know what's going on. Basically, the battle was predicated on, hey, we think there's bad guys out there, go find them and go fight them. It's, that's oversimplified, but it's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. And it covers that very well. They do an absurdly good job of honoring all these people that sacrifice themselves, and it's just good stuff, man. Just good stuff. If you haven't seen it, I don't know what to tell you, but it's great. And Sam Elliott playing war people is always a winner. All right, what do we got next? Oh, let's do our honorable mentions before we hit our top 3. That's the first 6 for you. Honorable mentions. I have 8 of them. I'm going to move through them really quickly. And a couple of them just existing on the honorable mentions, I feel like is going to take away I think you guys are going to not believe in the credibility of any of the rest of this, but that's fine. Schindler's List is set around a war. It's a little different. I think you guys will probably understand why I didn't put that in the list, but it's an incredible film. Apocalypse Now, which I think most people would contend probably should be in that top 9 list, but I stand behind it. Braveheart, which I think most people think of as an adventure movie, but it absolutely is a war movie. Hacksaw Ridge, which it's just superb. It's a great film, and it is the film in which Andrew Garfield reminds us after the Spider-Man movies that actually he can do things. Full Metal Jacket, which is another one I think most people would probably argue should be in that top 9 somewhere. Casablanca, which is considered by, I don't know, half the people on the planet to be the greatest film ever made. It likes to be in the top 1 or 2 of greatest films of all time, with people creating those lists who, self-styled experts. And then the 2 that I would consider to be, well, actually, no, it's 1, forgive me. Glory is one that, if I had to take any of these and put on that list, Glory's got to be it. You got Denzel, the guy from Back to the Future somehow. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, my bad. You have Morgan Freeman having a very late debut to superstardom, and it's just absurd. It's a great film about something that's extremely important, and takes place also in around where I live, and because of that, it's extremely interesting to me. Glory is an amazing film. All of these, by the way, if you have not seen them, you should see them, even if they're honorable mentions. All right, final 3. Are we ready? Number 3 is, we're in superstar, absolutely goated, does not get better than this tier. You could make an argument that all 3 of these are the greatest war film of all time, and I've seen people make arguments that all 3 of these films are the greatest war film of all time. And number 3 is going to be All Quiet on the Western Front. And I'm not talking about the 2022 version, which actually I've still yet to see. I've heard mixed reviews. Not because it's not a good movie, but because the film allegedly, according to some people who generally know what they're talking about, fails to highlight some of the anti-war sentiments that the book did. And the book is one of the greatest books about a war ever. All Quiet on the Western Front's unbelievable. It's in the tier with like Gods and Generals, or not Gods and Generals. Good Lord, The Killer Angels. I keep thinking of Gods and Generals because if we want to make a movie about the worst war films ever made, Gods and Generals would be pretty high up there. But All Quiet on the Western Front was created in 1930, and it's foundational to the way that a lot of people came to learn about why war is tragic and broken, and that there's this dissonance between what is happening in reality and what is being perceived at home. So much of that is laid bare way before mass disillusionment broke out in a lot of places in the world. All Quiet on the Western Front, the book and the film, are absolutely groundbreaking. And a lot of people say the only good books and the only good films about war are anti-war. And I don't know if that's 100% true. I don't think We Were Soldiers is anti-war necessarily, and it's excellent. But they can't be pro-war. And a lot of people get, these adrenaline ride films. You can watch them and they can be aesthetically brilliant, but they lack depth, emotional depth, intellectual depth, spiritual depth even. And that's why, and this is one of those first films to really plumb that. And the book, of course, obviously, the book dives down there and explores that at a level that so many of these films, especially modern films, good Lord, just don't. They just don't do. That's number 3, and find it. I'm pretty sure it's completely copyright free at this point because it's almost 100 years old, which means theoretically you should be able to just find it anywhere. But that's me halfway through the largest Manhattan I've ever drank. So, please stay legal. None of this is an advocation of doing anything that's not legal. But see these films where you can and when you can. All right. Second best war film of all time has to be Gettysburg. It is the greatest testament of Rotten Tomatoes not being worth your time or any level of credible, is that Grave of the Fireflies, which is a Studio Ghibli film, is their number 1 war film of all time. And, I don't care, and if you're into animated movies, it's fine, it's not a big deal. But if that's there, and Gettysburg is buried below 100, you don't have a good war movie list. Gettysburg is one of the most authentic films of all time. It does this amazing job. Even today, of course, it's been 160 years since, or it will shortly be 160 years since the events of Gettysburg took place. And it's still extremely contentious to talk about. Folks that, honestly, even plumbing the depths of that right now seems incredibly polarizing. But suffice it to say, there is a screaming need even now for people to understand the stories of everyone involved, capital E, everyone, without then turning around and trying to suppress other voices in that space, in that war. A lot of people fought and a lot of people died and a lot of people were in bondage that never should have been. And this film does a very good job of highlighting all of the major players of the film without somehow glossing over the realities of the causes we're looking at. There's this sense, and the reason Gods and Generals is such a bad movie is because it does such a poor, it's barely not a propaganda film. Gettysburg just says, hey, here is where these people came from. Here's why they're here. And here is what they would be talking about in this context. It doesn't try to address every issue that surrounded the Civil War. It tries to address the Battle of Gettysburg and what they'd be talking about and what they'd be doing over the course of those 3 days. And it's very rare for a filmmaker not to want to get their grubby fingers and put political feelings into their art. And I get that impulse, but this is if there was a bird's eye view of this battle, what would it look like? Well, it would look exactly like Gettysburg, the film from the 90s that just redefined what it looked like to have an accurate battle, except for one movie, which we're just about to talk about. Yes, if you are trying to understand the Civil War There's two things you need to watch. You need to watch Ken Burns' The Civil War, which, yes, it's dry, but it's still the best documentary that's ever been made about the Civil War. And you need to watch Gettysburg. And you need to never, ever, ever watch Gods and Generals. Good Lord. Gettysburg is also based off of, there's a tiny touch of fictionalization, and those pieces are borrowed from The Killer Angels, which is, I mentioned earlier, is adjacent to All Quiet on the Western Front in terms of war writing excellence. Can't say enough good things about it. All right, we're here at number 1, and I feel a little excited about this last one and the opportunity I have to share this with you, because very few people have seen it, because it's not super easy to get anymore, at least not in the States. That is Waterloo. Waterloo is the best war film ever made, and I don't think it's that close. I said the top 3, any of them could be number 1. I said that because a lot of people haven't seen Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo is one of the most consequential battles in European history. It took place in the early 1800s and cemented the fall after the glorious 100 Days of Napoleon Bonaparte, post-abdication, coming back, trying to take over France. And the British and a coalition assembled to stop him, and did so by the absolute skin of their teeth, and in doing so prevented autocracy. Well, that's not true. Prevented revolutionary autocracy. The Bourbons got tossed back in for about 20 years, a little less than 20 years. Actually, I think it was 15 years. There's so many revolutions in France, it's very hard to keep it straight. The point is, this battle was done to scale. More than 10,000 people were used in the creation of this film. And I'm just talking about actors. It is the landscape, as far as I've come to understand it, was terraformed for this film. It's not a United States-made film. And it is the epitome of what a war movie to scale can be, when everyone is dedicated to excellence, both in what they do and in telling an authentic story. And that is what's most important to me in a war film, in communications, even in what we do and making content here on the podcast. Authentic storytelling is the heart of what we do, and there is no better story than that told by Waterloo. And if you want to get your hands on it, you can hop on to YouTube. You can look up Waterloo, parentheses 1970, close parentheses, and you can watch Waterloo right now. I have no idea why it's up there. I'm not sure that it's super trademark friendly, but I will tell you that Waterloo, the film has been up for 3 years and almost 1 million people have seen it. So there it is, folks. There's my list of top 9. It's really more like a top 17. This is definitely more of a relaxed fit style episode. And if this is not to your liking, that's all right. Drew will be back next week, because I don't have any anniversaries next week. We'll pick up where we left off and we'll have a good time. But if you're looking for a suggested viewing list, I would happily recommend any of the films on here except for Gods and Generals. I kind of feel dirty even for having said the words. And guys, it is a pleasure and a blessing as always to be able to talk with you guys. Have fun. Stay safe out there. We'll see you at the range. Get a movie in.
Sonoran Desert Institute is an online school accredited by the DEAC. It is headquartered at 1555 West University Drive in Tempe, Arizona. For more information about how you can craft your firearms future, visit sdi.edu.